up, Internet? I woke up in pee this morning. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And listen, you little pygmy, my name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the 1994 Spike Lee joint, Crooklyn.
And this is the first Spike Lee movie we've done.
I know.
We talked a little bit about Spike Lee on the Can Batman Be Black episode.
Right.
As a movie that was seminal to me.
Yes.
Well, Do the Right Thing was seminal to me, and Malcolm X was seminal as well. How about you? Any seminal films for you?
Whoa, so many seminals. You know what? No, honestly, I only found Spike Lee's stuff later in my life.
Yeah.
So nothing has sort of changed. I enjoy them overall, but they are not something that I've sort of. I mean, Spike Lee's not making them for me. I don't think, which is I that's great. I enjoy them. I just I never seeked them out until probably I want to say maybe like 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, 7 or 8 years ago. I'm doing the math of your age here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It just never hit my.
Did any Spike Lee film like Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, Jungle? Fever?
Malcolm X is a given.
Yeah.
Jungle Fever I enjoyed. Again, they're overall his filmography for me, at least the ones that I've seen, because by far I have not seen all of them. They have always been like competent and good, and like I enjoy the film, like the watching of the film experience, and I try to take to heart what I believe he's sort of trying to say in each one. But they're never films that like I go back to, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And again, I don't know. It was funny. So I was watching when we were watching Crooklyn, and we were doing it. Why are we doing this film again, Sheer?
So New York City decided to have a one film, one New York event, and that we talked about this a few episodes ago, where New Yorkers were trying to get together, just like they had with a book review, with a book club,
but a whole city,
but a whole city. Well, no, a whole city with the book club as well, to watch one film, and the vote was put out that you could have that there was a vote for one of these 5 films, and they were On the Town, directed by Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen; New York, directed by Martin Scorsese; Desperately Seeking Susan, directed by Susan Seidelman; or The Wedding Banquet, directed by Ang Lee; or finally Crooklyn, directed by Spike Lee. And the votes were taken. Crooklyn won out as the film of the night, and at a whole bunch of movie theaters in New York, you could go and watch Crooklyn for free. I wonder, Matt, very quickly, you and I both would call ourselves New Yorkers at this point.
I guess it's weird to be. You know what? I would. I mean, look, I've been here over 11 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't consider myself a New York. I feel like almost like you have to be born here.
Right. You got to get the New York.
Yeah.
New York.
I mean, I definitely live in New York.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm a New Yorker. I mean, I think I can pass.
Yeah.
And I think I can
You can give the New York shade if you need to.
And I can also like sort of thrive and survive the way the sort of city works. I've learned the ins and outs of it, but again, I don't know if I can wear that badge.
You know what my metric is for if you're a real New Yorker?
What?
You can order your bagel at a deli without pissing off the deli owner. Like, because if you ever see a tourist ordering a bagel at a deli and they're like, what kind of cream cheese is it? If you can just walk up to a deli counter and be like, toasted whole wheat, sour cream.
There was a dude at a street meat cart today. Shout out to Rafiki's, the most delicious street meat in the history of New York City, in my opinion. But I was waiting in a Rafiki's cart today for lunch, and when
someone doesn't know what they're doing in New York, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. I was literally like, and you know what? Maybe I am a New Yorker now, but because me and both the dudes in the truck were looking like at each other like, can you believe this fuck? Like, what is happening?
Who is this fucking guy?
Arguing what a gyro was. I was like, you're gonna argue with the dudes who make these every day. What a gyro, whatever.
The reason I bring it up is that New York is obviously a unique cinematic landscape.
Unique
that is
New York. Unique New York.
Unique New York.
It's a vocal exercise.
That has been often filmed, is iconic in many movies. I'm curious what you think is quintessential New York cinema. If people are coming to New York, if like when you go to any country, I often like look for the cinema of that country.
Oh, you treat New York like a country.
Yeah, well, if you go to any city, if you go to any famous location in the world, and I think New York is one of the most famous locations on the planet.
Right.
What to you is quintessential New York? I feel like I know them. I have a guess what the answer might be.
I mean, mine is Escape from New York.
Oh, Escape from New York? Actually, that wasn't my answer. It wasn't my answer, but that's
Why,
a good
what's yours?
Well, my answer for you would have been Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean that's the Sam Raimi Spider-Man.
Yeah, Sam Raimi Spider-Man would have been and I think Spider-Man as a character is quintessential New York.
So I think the interesting thing is, so Escape from New York, I feel like from what I understand from New York's history, I know it's obviously never became a maximum security prison walled off, protected by the United States police force like an army, but give it time. We're almost to the end times. If anyone can get us to John Carpenter's future, it's Donald Trump. But the sort of the feeling of New York, even though it was a maximum security prison in that film, it definitely was like back when New York was not, because that movie was made in 1981, and that it definitely, that was during some dark times in New York City, depending on which parts of the city you were in.
Do you know it wasn't filmed in New York?
No, it wasn't. I'm saying it was representative. I'm not saying they wasn't filmed in New York. No, it was filmed. Actually,
I thought you were about to say like you were going to get to start talking about how like it reflected New York of
well, here's the deal. It did a very good, for not being filmed there. It did a very good job, sort of giving the if not the feeling of New York, what the entire world thought New York was.
A post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Yeah, in a weird way. And then the Spider-Man films in conjunction in the 2001 or whatever it was. It really, or maybe it was 2002, I don't remember, but it really gave that sort of like hopeful New York thing back, even down to like, it's kind of cheesy and campy, but when like the New Yorkers were throwing all the shit at the Green Goblin, like, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. Like, so I don't know. I've those are two very different sides of the quintessential. What about you?
I would say those two sides are defined by two different mayors, like the Ed Koch period of New York, and then the Rudolph Giuliani period of New York. Look, New York, because I watch New York as an outsider, so I go to the classic sort of Manhattan, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, obviously, Do the Right Thing, Dog Day Afternoon, the classic sort of New York. And I think there is a tendency to romanticize that period of New York's era where it was like tough guys walking the streets, and you could be beaten up on any corner kind of thing. But that was the allure of New York, the danger of it all. And I got to be honest with you, I wouldn't want to live in that period. No. I like the New York that I live in now, where it's pretty safe. The subways are safe at night, and I can order my bagel pretty quickly at any deli, fairly efficiently. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that in the New York one film event, Crooklyn was the film that was chosen out of, I think, I think if Raging Bull was selected, if Goodfellas, Goodfellas is sort of more of a New Jersey movie, but it, was part of that, or even Manhattan, you might see more of a romanticism for those kinds of films. But I think the reason why this film was chosen is it harkens to a very unique New Yorkness about it, and it is that romanticized period. It's set in 1974. It's Spike Lee, who's one of the great New York filmmakers, and it makes sense to me, even though I'm going to say this now. This is not my favorite Spike Lee movie.
No, it is not my favorite either. I think, actually, I'd never seen it before.
Right.
Before this, and I guess if we're sort of getting into initial thoughts of the film, I feel like I dug it. It definitely I'm a sucker for any sort of period piece that like makes me feel like I'm there.
Okay.
And this definitely does that for a small slice of New York City in the 70s.
Right.
Even though the movie was made in 94. I also really like how I was reading some articles about it, how it's loosely sort of based on Lee's family, but not like, it's not like a biopic. It's just like, it's sort of like touching
I love the
down
way
on
you
that.
say biopic.
Yeah.
It makes it sound like a medical term.
It is. Oh, it is a medical term. It had now this is a sort of
Tell me what it's about.
Oh, here's the IMDb thing. You ready? Here we go.
Okay.
Spike Lee's vibrant, semi-autobiographical portrait of a school teacher, her stubborn jazz musician husband, and their 5 kids living in Brooklyn in 1973.
1973.
That's not really what it's.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
it's accurate.
But then I feel like it's accurate for the first half, maybe first third of the film, and then it's definitely about Troy, the daughter.
Yeah. I think she becomes the prism, but with which we view the film through. But those aren't false statements.
No, they're true statements. The thing about it is, the characters are all wonderful, I feel like, in this film. And actually, some of the cinematography, some of the sweeping shots, especially going back to sort of appreciating a time period of a place, like the outsides of New York, when they're, especially in the beginning of the film, just going through and like sort of seeing all the activity that's going on in Bed-Stuy at the time, is really cool and just evocative of, like, it makes you feel like you're in the space. However, the movie, I feel like, kind of goes a little bit all over the place in an odd way, and not in a it's not in a like all over the place chronologically or all over the place sort of like where characters actually are. It just feels like, this is how I equated it, and I think I nailed it down, and it's not necessarily good, but it's not necessarily bad. It's the snippets of story that you get of this time period in this family's life, and particularly Troy's life, feels very childlike. It feels like the way I remember childhood memories. Like, some scenes seem like they should be really short, but they're really long. Other ones are really long that seem like they should be short. They jump around. They don't always resolve things that are in them, etc. And so I think that because Spike Lee is such a sort of masterful filmmaker, I feel like there definitely might be something sort of that might have been a forethought about it, about why the pacing of this movie is structured the way it is. Because if it wasn't a Spike Lee movie, I would say some of it feels sloppy. But because it's a Spike Lee movie, I feel like there has to be some reasoning behind it. And then the last thing I'll say, this movie suffered from something that we've been complaining about a lot in a lot of other films in the past couple years, and that is overuse and over-reliance on soundtrack. Yeah. There are 37 songs in this movie. Not score, songs. Yeah. And a lot of times they just played nearly the whole song underneath a scene happening, including dialogue. Yeah. And it's not good. Yeah. It takes away from what's going on, and it's distracting. Now, I get it. I get excited about using music all the time, too. But that was something that every time it happened in something like that, it felt like it derailed it a little bit for me. Okay. What about you?
So, for the past few weeks, I've been kind of like recounting director histories. I don't want to go through all of Spike Lee because it's long, and there's so much work here. He's definitely a filmmaker I'm very passionate about, but I have to admit, of recent years, I've been less and less interested in his work. I think the most notable things he's done recently are his documentary work, including When the Levees Broke, which was like a 8-hour documentary about New Orleans. His actual film work, films like Chirac, really, I tried watching it. I really did. And this is a filmmaker I love, filmmaker I grew up watching. I would say Do the Right Thing was one of those quintessential films for me growing up. I watched that film so many times. But he's a filmmaker that hasn't really kept my interest up, and I'm not sure what that is. Can
I make a guess? Okay. And this sort of opens up a topic to a little bit of a wider range, but okay. Let's talk real quick about aging directors. Yeah. And I don't necessarily mean, I almost don't necessarily mean like the age that they are, but just directors that have made so much work, especially like prolific ones, Spike Lee, Steven Spielberg, Scorsese, however you want to do it. There seems to be always, and this is, I feel like, with anyone's real body of work sort of anywhere, like no one can keep making hits forever. And by hits, I mean, I'm not talking about just box office success. I'm talking about beloved things or whatever, or as widely beloved as like certain, like Spielberg's not making Jurassic Park anymore.
No, but I think he's doing interesting work, and I think Scorsese is doing interesting work.
100%. They're all doing interesting work, and it's all masterfully crafted. But you don't get that same, like, I just wouldn't, even Spielberg, whose breadth of work is insane. If you just took the last 10 years, I'd just be like, I mean, these are good. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not wowed by them.
Everyone has a period. I mean, Quentin Tarantino has this conversation.
Same thing.
Yeah, well, he himself talks about specifically. He thinks that filmmakers should really only there should be a certain point at which they should stop. And he himself is trying to be true to that word and is only going to make 3 more films. And then he says he's going to quit filmmaking for good because he doesn't. And I think the filmmaker he really quotes there is Alfred Hitchcock as not having the last 3 or 4 movies he made being great. I think with Spike Lee, something slightly different is going on, which is the thing that I've always oddly found difficult to swallow about Spike Lee is that, you know, like why is it that Spike Lee, this guy who's made so many definitive, classic, important movies, still struggles to get funding for movies, even to the point where he's crowdsourcing, you know, funding. He's on Kickstarter to get money for movies now. He entirely kickstarted a movie, The Sweet Blood of Jesus, and I think there is. It seems like, and the film I'll point to here and to sort of back this up is his adaptation of Old Boy, which was an American remake of Old Boy, which wasn't very good. You know, again,
why remake Old Boy?
But the reason I think he would make Old Boy is he was probably offered it at some point. Like, you got to remember, Old Boy was kicking around for a while as a remake with Steven Spielberg attached even at one point, and Will Smith of all people. And I think it was like, oh, here's an opportunity. I'm an experienced filmmaker. I can make some money here and then do some other projects that I think are interesting. And I think projects like Chirac are actually speaking to what Spike Lee wants to do. He wants to make provocative films. But I think he's a filmmaker from a different period, still, you know, caught up in this new era. And it's amazing to me that he's not kind of as easily funded as someone like Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg. Like, he's not having the twilight of his career that those people are. And he's not an old guy, by the way. So, you know, he's not as old as Spielberg or
no,
Scorsese.
I meant sort of like as your filmography grows.
Yeah, of course.
How many hits, or I keep using the word hits, but like how many
great films can you make?
Sure.
Regardless, the amount of great films he has made, you know, means that he should be able to make whatever he wants to make now.
100%. Well, that sort of goes into a little bit even with Scorsese with Silence. It's a movie that I personally didn't enjoy, but I can see the craftsmanship and the sort of amazing care that was given and how personal of a story it was for him, how much it's felt like he really wanted to make that story, and he's earned that right. Spike Lee 100% has also earned the right to make any film he wants whenever he wants. It just, I 100% agree with the funding thing. I mean, that's bullshit.
It's crazy that he struggles to get funding. I mean, maybe he's just recently done a TV adaptation of his own film, She's Gotta Have It, which is coming to Netflix soon. Maybe, you know, working in long format, he'll be revitalized in some way. That said, this early period of Spike Lee, where Crooklyn does appear, is actually my favorite period of Spike Lee. It includes, of course, the quintessential "Do the Right Thing," which is every person who's interested in film, cinema, New York history, whatever, should stop what they're doing and watch right now. Malcolm X is amazing. There was another movie that came out exactly the same period as Crooklyn, a film called Clockers, which is an adaptation of a Richard Price book.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic. I absolutely love that film.
I remember liking Clockers.
Yeah, Mickey Pfeiffer is in it. Yeah, and he's fantastic. John Turturro, great soundtrack, and a really meaningful film. He even went through like a little bit of a weird period where he did a film like Girl 6, which was about a phone 6 operator, and that film is really, really underrated. It's a fantastic film. Get on the Bus is terrific, but I think he gets into this period where he's like having to make smaller films like Get on the Bus. He Got Game, masterful film. I absolutely adore that movie. I think, to me, that might be the last great Spike Lee film, even though a lot of people have a lot of love for 25th Hour and Inside Man. But I think that is the last, clear masterpiece of Spike Lee's career. At any rate, Crooklyn is an interesting one in that whole period, which is that, like you say, it's his most personal.
Yeah.
But it's also, as you kind of alluded to in your initial comments, it's also his loosest. And I don't know if it's loosest because he's working with child actors, and like it's much more vignette based, and it's much more of evoking a certain feeling. A lot of people do love this movie because it's very much of a time and of a place, and it very much puts you there. And I really did love that feel of it. However, I wasn't as enamored by the story, but there were moments of this movie that really, really resonated for me, even though I actually don't think the movie does a great job of like making those moments resonate. They resonate because the film just I just enjoyed being in this movie.
That's kind of what I was saying. Yeah.
I just liked being in this world. I was on Ivan Kander's podcast a few weeks ago reviewing a film called George Washington, David Gordon Green's film. And that's a similar, it's a film set in, I believe, Alabama or Tennessee. But it's about these 4 kids, in their summer days, and it's very dreamy and languid. And there's a sense to it where, like Ivan and I spoke on that podcast about how we just loved being in that world. And even though the narrative is very, very slight, there's this dreamy quality that makes up for it, that makes you feel immersed in that world. And it makes up for the lack of like narrative through line. In this case, I think Spike's film here is a little bit more, the scenes are structured in a much more, traditional narrative sense. Like we know, these are actors playing, and there's not this sort of dreamy camera work or anything like that. It just feels much more direct in terms of what it's trying to do. And I'm not as compelled, but I do think the kids in this film are amazing. I think they're really, he really captures the sense of this family. And I love how the first half of this movie captures the chaos of this family really well, with Alfre Woodard at the helm.
Who's a vampire, by the way.
Is she?
She looks exactly the same today.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's insane.
I haven't actually seen what
she was in Luke Cage.
Oh, was she?
Yeah. And
Alfre Woodard. Yeah.
Holy shit! It's uncanny.
She's also in Civil War.
Yeah.
The person I love is Delroy Lindo, and I think it's a crime that Delroy Lindo isn't in more movies.
Yeah, I agree.
He is a national treasure. I think he's masterful in this film. He was masterful in Malcolm X. He's masterful in Get Shorty. Everything he's in, he carries a weight, a presence to him that you can't take your eyes off this guy. And the warmth at which he plays the patriarch of this family
Woody
is just so... There's such a delightfulness to seeing him on the film, even when he is clearly not the villain necessarily, and not the antagonist of the film, but he's kind of the bad guy in this movie.
Well, he's kind of at this point in the relationship between Carolyn and him himself. He's the 6th kid.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can be frustrating for anybody in a relationship, especially one that's supporting 5 other people.
I mean, and he's the 6th kid in that he's stubborn about this, like about being true to his roots as a musician, even while his family can't afford to keep the power on. And it's a tricky one, because I believe him, but at the same time, there's a point at which you're going, if you're bouncing chicks, you have 5 kids, you might need to grow up a little bit.
There's a lot of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, the interesting thing is the end of this film kind of forces him into that position, but I don't think it like forces him hard into that position. It's not really about his transformation or anything like that.
No, well, that's the other thing. This film doesn't, at least the time period that it sort of takes place in, doesn't really have a lot of character transitions, with maybe the exception of Troy.
Yeah.
And her character transition is just ever so brief near the end, and I'm not even sure if it actually hit. I don't know if that's the point.
Yeah, that's the thing. On the other side of this, I was like, I kind of like this sort of just loose vignette of a movie, like it's not really, because each scene is interesting and lived in and feels good. I'm not as kind of afraid of that. If that makes sense, it doesn't really bother me as much.
There's certain moments of this movie that are just pure fucking magic. There's a moment where Woody is talking to Zelda Harris, Troy, on the steps after Woody had gotten kicked out for a weird fight that felt very strange. And he came and he brought the kids little presents or candy or whatever, and he brought the mother flour, and he was sitting on the stoop with his daughter, with Troy, and it felt so just beautiful and natural, and like this conversation a father and a daughter were having. Like that moment was like the first moment where I was like, oh my god, like this beyond just sort of the set dressing of New York feeling like a real place, like these characters feel like real, like a real moment in these people's lives. I'll even go farther than character and say people's lives.
Yeah.
Now that's not the norm of this film. I think it does a fine job showing, like you said, the chaos of the family.
Yeah.
But I feel like sometimes it borders into caricature.
Okay.
Because and I don't think I'd even notice that if it weren't for these striking scenes. I'll get into more as we sort of go through. And they're minimal scenes that normally are the ones that got me in this, but they just felt so good.
It felt a lot like an Eric Romer film, the French filmmaker who did A Summer's Tale. They're very slight movies, you're kind of just jumping in at this little moment in time, a little transition happens, and then you're out again. And the thing about this film is it doesn't demand a lot of you.
No.
Like, it's not forcing the audience to kind of engage with it on a rrhetorical level in any sort of heavy way.
Yeah, with possibly the exception of Sniffy or whatever.
Snuffy played by Spike Lee.
And Right Hand Man, who is a dude who doesn't literally have his right hand.
But see, the reason I think that it doesn't play that angle very hard. In fact, it kind of treats it as like side relief, as though the effect of drugs on a neighborhood and the detrimental effect.
And by drugs we mean glue in a bag.
Yeah, are much harsher played in films like Malcolm X and particularly Jungle Fever, which has like this whole side narrative about crack cocaine with Samuel L. Jackson's character. That's really
light.
Yeah, really hard hitting. And I think, even the jazz musician story has you could find that story in Mo Better Blues with Wesley Snipes' character, but it's kind of treated as like a very slight thing. And I think there's something, even though I didn't connect with this film as much as, say, I connected with a film like George Washington, I kind of, despite me not enjoying it, I kind of enjoyed what it was. If that makes sense. I enjoyed that there was this slight, light slice of this moment in time, and I liked that the film just kind of existed as that, and it wasn't forcing me too hard to go in any other direction. And I think if I was,
oh my god, is this your Marvel movie?
Is this my Marvel movie?
Yeah.
This is my idea of fun. No,
I'm not talking about fun. I'm just talking about like something that you could enjoy. Well, I don't know. Did you enjoy?
Yeah, I did enjoy it. That's the thing. I didn't like love the movie, but I kind of enjoyed watching it because it was just so pleasant. It was just such a pleasant movie to watch. Like it was a pleasant place to be. And I think, given the stories that you could tell about 1974 Brooklyn, BedStuy, African-American family living in dire poverty, this movie is so pleasant and enjoyable that there's something pleasurable about seeing, that kind of world portrayed in a way that I wouldn't expect from a filmmaker like Spike Lee, who's done those stories before.
Right. I think why I sort of enjoyed it was
the movie. The wrong movie.
No, I know. With the sort of the reasons that you said, because we are fed a lot of this like sort of like dangerous inner city New York stuff during that time period.
Yeah.
Hell, I mean, again, Escape from New York it's selling that sort of angle of New York.
Yeah.
Here is just like, yeah, well, around all that, there's still a good community and like families that go through the same problems that families have gone through since we had modern families.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of nice to see that in a time period.
Yeah.
And I definitely enjoyed that. again, I don't.
It does get silly, particularly when they go down south. Like the film does kind of get a little.
Well, yeah, with like dogs
silly.
getting stuck in
Yeah.
couches and like
Character of southern mothers and that sort of thing.
There's also a lot of threads in this movie that Spike Lee does a very good job setting up and then never pulls on.
And
Which that's life.
Yeah, and that's the thing that the best way I would describe it is that I'm not mad at the film for not pulling off every thread. It kind of, because I feel like the film just kind of drops in on this family and then takes off. You know what I mean? It's like visiting a family.
Right.
You know?
I'm only mad because cinema has conditioned me to expect certain things.
Right. And
that's not, and I guess I'm always mad.
Because you're always mad. That's your secret.
Yeah. It's just interesting because, like, yeah, movies have set up a thing where normally, if there should be a payoff to a thing you've set up, and if there's not, then you fucked up.
Yeah.
This is not a case of that. This is, again, if I'm looking for a through line to this the reason why this feels so lilting and just sort of like floaty, for lack of a better term, I think, and I hope I'm right on this because I think it makes the style much more palatable for me. Palpable, I don't know, either one.
Yeah.
Is that it feels like childhood memories.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, even though it focuses on Troy, the only daughter in the family, but it's very, moments in her life or her family's life, the big moments are big and the small moments are memorable. And for some reason, she remembers a weird knockout, drag out fight between her parents for one thing, and then another thing she remembers, fighting with their brothers about the watching Soul Train or whatever, like these moments where they're just all dancing and like it's just a sort of interesting way of, like, because even when I look back at like my childhood, like my memories are there, but they're not like clean,
right? And
they're not something that I could easily just be like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. I'd be like, well, I remember feeling this,
yeah,
and I remember sort of, oh, my dad did yell this one thing, and I felt so this, like. That's it feels like you're going through memories of a family.
Right. And but there is something enjoyable about it. Now, again,
I'm saying that's why I'm saying if that's the framework, and if I'm correct in it, I like it more than if it's just sort of haphazard, which I don't think it is.
I still didn't like the film for me. And to be fair, Eric Roma films, his spring, summer, winter ones, I've watched once. I kind of found them enjoyable, and I never watched again. I never really gave them much thought. And it's the same with Crooklyn. It wouldn't rank highly because it doesn't hit me very hard, which is something that I equate Spike Lee to doing. But at the same time, I was like, no, he doesn't need to do that every time. And I kind of like the gentleness of this film, the gentle spirit of it. And like a Japanese filmmaker that I love, Hirokazu Kurita, is all about that. His films are just these gentle family tales, and I find them incredibly beautiful and powerful. Mm-hmm. I think the thing is that you could argue that there's a certain clumsiness to which the scenes are kind of stitched together as we jump from scene to scene to scene that doesn't feel as fluid as it could be. But that's not to say, like, again, as you say, fragmented memories and, the way it plays out. It plays out a little more haphazard than I would have particularly liked.
And then to sort of catapult off that, I think something that is the beyond that, because I can get over that whether it's the narrative reason I've cooked up and that's real, or even if it's not, I can get by it because so many of the small scenes really work for me. It's the use of music in this film felt.
It felt tacked on top of the movie.
It felt tacked on. It felt very collegey.
Yeah.
It felt
it's
like
weird. It's weird though, because I like all the songs.
Yeah, the songs are great, and
I like hearing them. And
they fit in a I was sort of, because this is what I do. I was listening and like Guardians of the Galaxy. There was one crossover song, and then I was like, and that was Ooh Child, by the way.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I remember you having a problem with the Cat Stevens song, right? Mm-hmm. Which I never did.
Yeah.
And then all the songs that play in this movie, like when important scenes are happening, like are very on the nose. I don't have a problem with the on the noseness. I want to make that very clear.
Yeah.
It's the way the song is used and intercut and mixed. The sound mix of this film, and I know it's 94. Like I'm not trying to shit on it in that regard, but you combined poor basically music design, I guess, and a really poor mix. And that's what whenever I was feeling like I was getting into like just a groove of being in the space, something like a song would play too long over dialogue, or ADR would be like 12 times louder than it should be, or just something stupid. I remember even they have braids and sort of shells in their hair at one point, and the sound mix on the shells when they turned their head was like a wind chime slamming into your face. And I was like, there's these beautiful things that the movie is actively trying to get me to not pay attention to.
It's weird. Like, I would describe it as, it feels like the note to sound was to imagine the film as though there was a radio in the background of every scene and was always on. And the problem is that kind of wears thin a little bit. I enjoyed listening to the songs in terms of just hearing songs that I like.
I would listen to the Spotify playlist, but I wouldn't listen to it while I was watching a movie.
Yeah, and I just kind of felt like it was a little overplayed, and it kind of felt like a little bit shapeless in terms of the way that the music was being used. But
felt very Suicide Squad-y.
I wouldn't go that far, because I don't think they ever like make a moment out of every song. It kind of like scenes play and the song is playing in the background.
I was just saying it felt like, I really like the song, throw it in the movie. Oh, this makes sense here because they're on the stairs. Like that's
it's like when and spoilers for the film, when Alfred Woodard's character dies, and Troy has to kind of grow up, we hear "Ooh Child," and it's kind of like it is a little on the nose, But again, there's this kind of gentleness to this whole film. There's a gentle naivete to this whole thing. The one thing there's a meta commentary that I was kind of thinking about, even in relation to something I said just on this podcast, which was that thinking about the period of time that this was in, an African American family in Brooklyn struggling for money, struggling to keep the lights on, and expecting that to be a tragedy, I think speaks volumes about my relationship to what I think Spike Lee is about. And what I enjoy about this film is this film defies my prejudice against what I think Spike Lee's films are about. That makes sense. And I think in relation to our conversation about Detroit, for example, a film where I had a little bit of a problem with the way in which Detroit treated the riot as sort of without a proper context.
I remember.
And I think, what this film offers you and is kind of quite lovely in doing is it presents you a world that you're not used to seeing on screen. And that in itself is a revolutionary act.
Yeah.
Even though the film is kind of gentle and guiding and not asking too much of its audience, and it's just kind of like this cool, breezy trip down memory lane.
And a little bit all over the place.
And a little bit all over the place. It's kind of pleasant to watch a film that defies, I don't know if it's everyone's expectations, but my personal, prejudices.
Well, it's what you've seen too. Like, I mean, I'll forgive something that's new, and even though it shouldn't be new and innovative, it is in the space that it's being presented.
Yeah.
And I will forgive a lot of flaws for something.
Anything to forgive.
I'm saying I'm using the term forgive as in like I will look past sort of things that would normally get me to hang up and not enjoy a film as much as I could.
Right.
Because it's showing me something I've never seen before, granted in a way that I think could have been better, but it doesn't particularly matter. I feel like I'm kind of shitting on it. I don't want to shit on it. I think, again, some of the other small moments that I really enjoyed, when the family does drive down south and they're in the road trip in the car, there's some sweet moments with the entire family in the car. There's a really
I
sweet...
think every time the kids are together, I kind of love it.
It's really whenever Troy is talking to one of the two parents is really what gets me.
Right.
She crawls in the front of the car as they're driving because they're all falling asleep, and it's just a really sweet moment. And then the thing that got me, the thing that really made my ears perk up, and I was like, oh shit, like this is some fucking, like this is the movie I want, is when Troy is left with her aunt in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And she gets a letter from her mom, and the way that the letter is sort of told, because it's
First, we cut to Alfred Woodard talking directly to camera.
About it, and then like sort of almost narrating, but directly to camera once in a while, things that are happening with the family, and then you see the things, and like I was like, this is masterful.
Oh, this is quintessential Spike Lee.
Oh, it's so fucking good, and I was like, this, and I'm glad they didn't overdo it. They did it sort of 2 and maybe an 8th times.
But this is that period of Spike Lee where not only was he creating provocative cinema, he was a master of the medium, and he's still
so powerful.
He still is.
The interesting thing is, like, that to me, the way they portrayed Troy reading this letter from her mother, it looks exactly how reading a letter from a family member feels.
Right.
Like, and I don't know how else to sort of put it. Like, that's literal emotion transcribed into a visual medium that's as clear as it'll ever get for that one particular feeling. And it's funny because those are moments where I'm just like, Jesus Christ, like that's that when your head cracks open, you're like, how can a human sort of pull this off? And there's moments like that in the film that I think are gorgeous, but then when put next to the rest of the film in its sort of like sort of cadence, they're off-putting, but in an enjoyable way. Like it calls out the other minor flaws more when those moments happen, because I'm like, this is magic. No, bring the magic back. Like you just moved me hardcore for like 8.5 minutes, and I want that again. Like, let's keep doing things like that.
There's even little moments when Delroy Lindo's performs, and he performs this concert, and not a lot of people turn up. And his son comes back, and he walks into the room, and he says the Knicks won the NBA championship, and walks off. And we realize, the son is pissed off because he was forced to miss the game. And this moment lands on Delroy Lindo like, oh, I've forced my kids into something that they didn't enjoy.
Right.
And maybe this is the moment that he kind of like grows up, but it's a tiny moment, but it really kind of lands. And it's amazing that this film is kind of filled with little moments like that. There is a little bit of a tendency for Spike Lee to, I think, reuse some of his tricks, and sometimes his tricks feel like they're out of context within the film he's in. Particularly like the classic Spike Lee thing is to put the actors on the dolly track so that it looks like they're floating. He does that a couple of times in this film.
Once upside down.
Yeah, once upside down when they're sniffing glue. And it kind of. There's a whole thread in this film where Snuffy feels like he's tormenting Troy, and she has these kinds of visions of him tormenting her.
But it's not clear.
It's not clear, and it doesn't really, the final scene of it where she finally overcomes it doesn't really land as much as it just kind of happens.
This is what I honestly feel like this is. This is a memory of 2 dudes in his neighborhood that he had, and he's like, oh, I gotta put these guys in the movie because they were part of the neighborhood, and all the kids were scared of him, and maybe he had nightmares about it. You can see the writing on the wall. They just have no space in this story. Yeah. Like, it's just very like silly and kind of okay, cool.
Yeah, and I think. I think we're both saying as well, this film doesn't, it's not like, for me, if I'm telling someone to watch Spike Lee movies, this is not the one I point to. This is sort of an interesting counterpoint. It's a little bit, looser, and it's not one that I would necessarily recommend. But this, I do feel this about Spike Lee in general, even though I couldn't quite make it through Chirac. Chirac is really, really tough to watch. Even though I couldn't make it through, I think Spike Lee, for me, he's always worth my time. Like, he's even at his...
He'll always show you something that you weren't expecting that you will blow your mind, and it's that's actually kind of true of a lot of the films that I've seen. Like, granted, there's specific ones, Malcolm X in particular, for me, that like really from start to finish is just it's great. But a lot of times it's like, this is fine. Oh, this might be off. Holy shit! Did you just? Oh my God, that's amazing what he just did. I want more of that. wait, where'd it go?
Yeah.
Like there's always 2 or 3 moments in the films that I'm always just like, it blows my mind.
Yeah, he's never not without ideas.
Yeah.
You know, like he's always firing. It's funny, the only time I've ever seen him without a clear sense of what to do with a film, one is Old Boy. I'll give it that. Old Boy really doesn't work. But I think that's a matter of like premise from the get-go is like, why remake this film?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that was Dead on Arrival before he was signed.
I feel like that. But there was this little series back in the early mid 1995. The Lumiere Kodak, I believe, found a bunch of or rebuilt a few of Lumiere's original cameras.
Okay.
You know, the original hand crank, you had to actually like roll it to actually make film. And they sent it out to 100 filmmakers around the world. And Spike Lee was one of them. And David Lynch was another one. And David Lynch made this amazing film. It's like you're not even sure how he made it, kind of thing. You know,
Well,
like
he's David Lynch.
He's David Lynch. And Spike Lee was the only filmmaker out of all the filmmakers who kind of just phoned it in. He just turned the camera on and pointed at his son for like 10 seconds and then turned it off. And it was like, that's the only time I've ever seen Spike Lee kind of phone it in.
Sure.
You know, even, you know, like a film that I loved this year that ironically came out last year, and it might be my favorite film of the year still. It's the O.J. Simpson documentary that we've been talking about. Owes an enormous debt to what Spike Lee did with Four Little Girls and with When the Levees Broke, which are masterful exposés about the way in which the New Orleans disaster happened. And, you know, I think, you know, as I say, even though this is a gentle, loving film that doesn't really land for me, it is still worth your time, even though I wouldn't highly recommend it. It's such a strange thing. I feel like this entire episode for us has been this gentle meandering around this film.
Well, we learned it from watching it, not it the film. Do you know what I mean? We learned it from watching Crooklyn. Yeah, no, it's meandering, and I never want to shit on a film for trying something new, even if that doesn't work. Now, something that happened in this film that I feel like didn't work, but again, I like the concept, and I've seen other people pull it off better since now, and maybe he sort of started the pioneer of this sort of, you know, I don't know, is when they all get down to the suburbs. I don't know if you noticed, but the aspect ratio, it's not the aspect ratio, it's the squeeze effect that normally would make a
anamorphic
print
film
look wide print. The anamorphic goes away, and it's all squishy.
Yeah, it's unsqueezed film.
Yeah, and the reason why that is, from what Spike Lee was saying, was he wanted the world that Troy was now inhabiting to feel alien. Yeah. Now, I didn't catch that right away. I thought my settings on my PlayStation were broken. So I stopped it. I tried to figure out why the fuck it happened. And it's not quite as subtle as when like aspect ratios change for things, you know, like that in films these days. It feels like a mistake.
Yeah, it did it had an unusual effect for me. I don't think it quite worked.
And I feel like it's one of those things that probably in 94 in a theater, people didn't even notice, and they knew it felt weird, but they weren't quite sure.
Yeah.
But now in the day and age of like, oh, a million things can go wrong in your home entertainment system, and like maybe it could have hit a fucking weird pan and scan thing.
Yeah.
And like all this stuff. So I instantly went into troubleshooting mode when it happened, and there was no fixing it because it was burnt in. I went on the internet and I was like, oh.
Yeah. The effect that it had for me was that it made... You know what it made me feel like was that the world in the South was bigger. You know, like you live in New York, in Brooklyn, in a brownstone. There's this like compression of space where people are just on top of you.
Even though they had 3 floors in that brownstone.
I know that brownstone would probably go for like 1.5 million.
Way more than that. Way more.
Yeah, at a minimum now, even if it was in a bad neighborhood.
4 mil easy.
But it felt like the sky opened up a little bit. Although I do find that the sort of the fact that everyone is squeezed was a little bit off-putting, and I was just like, I just want to squeeze it back into the correct ratio.
Me too.
But you know, like here's one thing: is imagine we think about it being slightly like audacious as a technique. Imagine the fact that this film's main home release method would have been VHS,
right?
Where we either would have been put into pan and scan, or that would have seemed like it would be very rare to get a 16:9 VHS tape back then. So that whole thing would have just been, like super confusing both for distributors and for the audience.
It's trying something. I don't think it worked, but I like that he tried it after the fact and after learning about why he did it, etc.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Spike Lee sometimes uses techniques that I think are interesting techniques, but not being used in the right context here. So I didn't love that thing particular. I didn't love the Dolly on Tracks thing, which is normally I love. Whenever Spike Lee does that, I think it's brilliant. But this was a case where I didn't think it was particularly well used. And we've talked about the soundtrack as well. So there's plenty of negatives here. There's plenty of positives too. In terms of so if we're going to wrap it up and go back to the initial point about New York on film. This is a New York on film that doesn't get talked about a lot, which is that it's a loving New York on film. It's a beautiful family, and despite all the sort of initial, Alfre Woodard running down the stairs, smacking her kids to tell them to clean up the kitchen and that sort of thing, this is a loving family unit that's still held together, even if they're being held together by strings at this point.
And I don't think they're even being held together by strings. I think they're being held together by something
financial strings.
Yeah. I think the love that there is very prevalent, and it's a very strong sort of presence throughout the film. I think what I like about it is it kind of it showed us a thing that outsiders would be like, oh, this is so rare, but I believe, and again, I wasn't there until I get my time machine working. I'll never know.
Yeah,
that this was the norm.
Yeah,
this presents New York in this sort of yep, families live here. It's not a fucking hellhole. It felt like people living their lives, and it alluded to a whole community of people living their lives.
Right.
Even the problem neighbor, Tony with the Coke bottle glasses.
Did you notice that he was the singer when they were in down south and they were watching a sort of gospel video with kids? And they were saying,
"Oh, was he? He was the guy.
He was the singer."
That's interesting.
And I was waiting for that sort of some
reveal.
Some payoff. He was a singer down south, and he'd kind of fallen off his ways. But it was the same actor.
And even things like that. So there's a confrontation finally because the dude plays weird music at all hours of the night as he's composing, and he has 30 dogs, and so the kids throw garbage in his yard. So much child lying in this movie. Everyone was lying like little kids are apt to do. And there was a sort of an altercation, and then Woody comes outside, and at one point one of their tenants, who I didn't even realize was a tenant until the electricity got cut off, it was very sort of strange. I didn't quite understand that. Again, it was a very lilting storyline. Vic went out, and when the guy was yelling at the kids, he punched Tony in the face. This time Woody came out and was like, look, man, this just has to stop. He's and if it'll help, I'll come help clean up your shit. It's fine. And those sort of moments felt very again, what I think and what I'd like to believe New York was actually like back then, as opposed to this place where you're just going to get stabbed. Even I think Roger Ebert actually in his review was talking about how it's funny, even altercations like that today, you'd be afraid to do that to your neighbor because they might stab you, they might shoot you, you don't know what's going on anymore. And this was a community where even if you didn't like each other, and even if you kind of screwed each other over from time to time, you're not murdering people.
And I gotta admit, so I've lived in New York for the last 7 years. I am an implant on New York, definitely. But the thing I love about New York is that there is a gruffness to New York. There is fuck, this guy's ordering his deli, his bagel really slow. It's really pissing me off.
I got places to be. I
got shit to do. But people are still the misconception about New York is people aren't friendly here. People are really friendly in New York. Most New Yorkers that I've encountered are really cool, friendly people. They talk gruff and they got shit to do,
and they'll give you resting subway face if you try to talk to them first.
But if you ask them a question, you need to find somewhere to go, 9 times out of 10, 5 people are going to help you, and people are going to like step up for New Yorkers, which is ironically the thing that I think Spider-Man really gets right, which is New Yorkers are a tribe. Even though they're made up of multiple villages, it is a unique tribe that sticks together.
Sure.
And it's lovely to watch, and it's lovely to kind of see that on screen
When it counts.
Right. Of course, you still might get stabbed.
Yeah.
If you're standing in front of me and you order your bagel, whole wheat everything, and then you dilly-dally about which particular cream cheese you're going to get, you might get stabbed.
If you order your bagel like Spike Lee told this story, they're not. Don't do it. But if you want to eat your bagel at home, like Spike Lee told this story, as slow or as fast as you want, depending on the help. Maybe you want to even just lick all the cream cheese off first. You can do
you can eat
that
it like an Oreo cookie.
Yeah. Because it's your big day. I don't know. Let's go sort of final thoughts. I'll just go first. I just think I think the small vignette sort of action of it really does work. It just does feel too lilting from time to time. Though I will say it does solidify more in its third act.
Yeah, it comes into focus because of the death of one character.
Right. Again, the moments of genius, the letters in particular, were just absolutely spectacular. But again, the music choices and the usage and the sound design really kind of threw me for a loop. Again, I sort of said, like, obviously this movie isn't made for me, but for 2 reasons. One, I am a white, I grew up a white kid.
I don't think that's a reason it's not made for you.
No, I'll get to it. I'm saying, like, I'm a kid who grew up in the suburbs, and not in the city. So like, I just didn't whatever. It's not reflecting my, which is, it doesn't have to be, what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise you don't be watching a very few films.
Well, I'm sort of getting to the point. So like, one, it doesn't reflect sort of my childhood, even though it's getting you in the vein of a child, of a certain type of childhood. And 2, I grew up as an only child where this is a huge family.
Right.
And so like, it's funny because instantly I don't have that, like, I can relate to this impact that a film might have, but I love that it shows me something that I hadn't experienced before, even if those experiences are a little all over the place, and the only place that I can actually nail down a sense of familiarity is how the memories are remembered and portrayed. And I think that's cool as shit.
Yeah.
So like, it's a roundabout way of saying, for me, if you haven't seen, at this point it'd be odd, but if you haven't seen Crooklyn, you should see Crooklyn. I enjoy that it was the winner of the group, sort of the group think film fest.
Yeah, the New York One Film
Fest. And I think it's a quintessential sort of slice of life of New York during a time, and of how families work and function in almost like a realistic day-to-day sort of life. And again, growing up as an only child, that's stuff that I never saw, and it was very interesting.
Yeah. No, I look, again, it's not my favorite Spike Lee movie. It's not a part of the Spike, and I'm passionate about Spike Lee, but
the Spike Lee cinematic universe.
The Spike Lee cinematic universe, yeah. But this is what I love about it, is this gentleness with which it presents a story that isn't filled with the angst of other films that I like his, that I actually
angst free.
It's completely angst free. It's just
some characters do have a little bit of I wouldn't call it angst, I'd call it nerves or something. Yeah. But I get.
But the film isn't like really trying to like press that button, And so I just enjoyed watching it. I just had a good time, kind of like being in this world. Yeah. I think like David Gordon Green's George Washington is a film that I enjoy a little more, but apples and oranges, so to speak. And I think we should explore this New York on film thing a little further at some point, because we're in a unique position in that we can just open our window and see the New York cinematic universe, and we have a unique opportunity to do so. And I hope those who participated in the New York One Film event get something out out of this particular podcast. If you did, please write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. And if you did enjoy that, you start to search, because there are also rarities within the New York cinematic universe that we don't touch. They're not the Manhattans or the Woody Allen movie Manhattan,
or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, exactly, or the Raging Bulls. There are tiny films about New York that we don't talk about, and I get a unique pleasure out of watching, since moving here, watching New York on film. Now that and the thing that I always love is when someone is in a chase scene and they run from 86th Street and they're suddenly on 14th. It just drives me nuts. But that's none of that is what this film is. This film is a gentle ode to a New York that I didn't live in, but I was scared of, and what this film taught me was that I didn't have to be scared of it. And that's a beautiful thing to make the centerpiece of the New York One Film event. Yeah. So I dug it, even though I didn't like it that much. It's so really funny. It's such a weird way to say.
All right. Well, this has been the only podcast about the film Crooklyn. Shahir,
better known as Brooklyn.
Yeah. Well, Shahir, when you're not abating your fears as a child through Spike Lee joints, where can folks find you?
I'll be at the cinema watching it at www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. That's not true. I'm not afraid of it. Clown monster. Matt, when you are not seeing your only childhood on film, where can people find the solo Matt?
You can find me at Skeletor, the number 4 PREZ, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, we have a bunch of, we'll do them next week because we're wrapping up now. We have a couple emails coming in. Thank you guys so much for writing in. Also, please write us some iTunes reviews. We have 1 or 2 new ones on there. We appreciate it. We'll read those out when we get them. Next week, we're in the drolls a little bit for these next 2 weeks.
I think there's a Braid Runner coming up soon.
Yeah, I know. Yep. Is that next week? I don't think it is.
It might. We'll have to look it up. Because of our release schedule, it might not be. But either way, stay tuned, people. It might be a surprise, but it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, but we're going to slowly get into, I guess, holiday movie season.
Yeah.
Between Halloween and then Thanksgiving has an interesting. Well, the Thor obviously, and then Christmas. I mean, Star Wars.
Obviously. We're definitely doing Thor.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, you don't think so? Between my love for Marvel and Taika Waititi's fucking "You're a Hometown Hero," let's do it.
Listen, fool me once, and I'm a fool. Fool me twice.
Well, I don't even know what you're talking about,
and I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Well, I'm
doing
idea.
The George Bush version of.
Won't get fooled again.
Yeah, I won't get. You can't fool me twice.
Okay, but I don't know who's fooling you. Is Tycho fooling you? Is Thor fooling you?
It's Taika, by the way.
Oh, I always thought it was Tycho.
I think Tycho is like a rip-off toy car maker.
Well, there's Tonka trucks and Tycho trucks. Yeah.
Oh, is that it? Yeah, Tycho.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Tycho.
Like Mega Blocks?
Yeah, exactly like Mega Blocks.
This is going to be exciting.
Yeah, well, listen. Well, that's Thor's not next week, but it's going to come. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. By Odin's beard. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.